everyone, I'm Vic.
And I'm Wes, and this is Vic and Wes MTB.
We're professional mountain bike skills coaches from South Africa, and we're here to help you along your mountain bike journey.
If you like our content, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps us to share the love and spread the stoke.
With that said, let's get into this week's episode. Today, we're going to be covering how to ride drops.
And stick around to the end where Vic shares with us how she conquers her fears when hitting those bigger drops.
Yeah!
Let's get into it. The first thing that we need to consider before we start dropping our bikes is our bike setup. We need to make sure our suspension is set up correctly before hitting those bigger features like drops. If you don't know how to do this, then do some homework and go online and check your factory settings of the specific shock that you run on your bike. I run ROCKSHOX, and they have a really nice app online which you can use to help you set up your suspension in the right way. One thing that we need to make sure of when we do ride those bigger drops is that our suspension is open. This means that your suspension is working. So if you've got your front shock, it's actually going up and down. And if you do run a full sus, that the rear is also open. And when we do set up our suspension to make sure that the front shock's rebound is a little bit quicker in the front than at the back. The next thing we need to consider is our tire pressures. I like to pump my tires up just a little bit harder when I start hitting those bigger drops and getting more air time. This helps me avoid damaging my rims. I also run my front tire a little bit softer than my back tire. This just helps me to guide my front end into the landing zone and get a little bit more traction when I land. For more information on suspension setups and tire pressure setups, check out the links in our description below. Having the ability to drop your saddles when we do start hitting bigger features like drop-offs and jumps is very important because it helps us create space. Dropping your saddle is a safety aspect when hitting those bigger drops. It really helps us stay solid on the bike and really helps us create the space that we need to handle our bikes correctly, especially when we land. So if you don't have a dropper seat post, go ahead and lower your saddle when you start practicing those drops. And if you do have a dropper seat post, then yeah, that's rad. Finally, for those of you starting out, we do recommend some flat pedals. This really helps us build the correct form and technique when handling our bikes in the air. So now that we have your bike set up correctly, let's drop into it.
The first skill we need to dial in before getting our wheels in the air off of drop-offs is learning to weight and unweight the bike so that we can create a light bike off the drop-off. We do this by standing up on level pedals, focusing on heavy feet, light hands, and we're going to load our bike through our feet by stomping hard, quick and fast, and making a rapid movement by pushing through both our pedals. We want to get the feeling for loading our front suspension through our feet. So we want to make sure that we don't load the front end of our bike through our arms, but rather through our feet. And just to quickly show you how the front end still compresses even though I load through my feet, if you keep an eye on that little red O-ring on my fork, as I compress through the middle of my bike, you'll notice how the front end also compresses. Once we've dialed in loading our bikes, we now want to use that energy that we've generated into the bike to create some kind of unweighting or weightlessness with the bike. The goal is to try and get the front end to rise up with you and follow you up. And the way that we do this is we maintain a firm grip, and as we load, we then explode up with the body and the bike will rise and follow us up. During the unweighting movement, we want to make sure that we stay connected to our bikes and we want to ensure that our feet don't come off the pedals. And the way we do this is by creating what we call a body wedge. We want to create a firm grip, which we've already mentioned, and then we want to create an opposing force between the handlebars and our feet. So I'm going to point my toes down and push back on the pedals in the explode while maintaining a firm grip, and that way I can stay in contact with my bike. So to recap all the movements, we're going to load our bike through our feet, maintain a firm grip, and then we're going to explode up and allow the front end to rise up with us, and we want to focus on being light and not finding height. The goal of this movement is to allow the bike to follow us up when we become light. So we want to be very careful of not pulling up on the handlebars and also not pulling up with our feet. We're going to dial the skill in on a flat open area, and we're going to work on our timing and coordination of the movement. So a great way to practice your timing is to put out a set of cones or a stick or something as a marker, and this is where you want to really dial in the timing of getting that unweighting of the bike and allowing that front wheel to come up just a little bit. So a good starting point is to load your bike about half a wheel length from the cones or the marking point that you have, and then as your front wheel reaches the lip, which in this case would be where the cones are, that is where the unweighting of the bike is going to happen. The slower we come, the more we need to load our bikes, and the reason for this is speed helps us generate stored energy into the bike. So if we're not coming as fast, we need to create more energy in the bike by loading a little bit harder. And so in terms of our body positioning, we can be a little bit taller and more explosive in the movement. The faster we come, the less we load, because the speed coming up to the drop has stored more energy in the bike, and so we need to do less work. And when doing this load movement with more speed, you can have a little bit of a lower body position on the bike. So here's a little catch. The faster we hit drops, the easier they are, because the easier it becomes to hold that front wheel up in the air. The slower we come, the harder we need to work at keeping that front wheel up. So a good way to practice this is to increase your speed by 1% every time until you are comfortable hitting drops or doing this movement a little bit faster. When starting out with air drops, we always want to choose a feature that is small enough and still rollable. And what that means is that if my bike were to roll down the drop, I want to make sure that my front chainring clears the lip of the drop. Then I know that if I don't get it right while I'm practicing, it's still safe enough to roll.
Cool guys, so now that we have the movement dialed in and we have our timing dialed in, we can move to a small little drop. Remember to keep it small and keep it safe. The first thing we need to consider is keeping the front wheel up long enough for the back wheel to clear. So we need to have a good awareness of the length of our bikes. If we do this movement correctly, the front wheel will unweight at the lip, and then you'll have enough speed to make sure that the front wheel stays at this level long enough for the back wheel to clear the lip before the front wheel dips. And then all you need to do is let both wheels drop down together and land flat. Remember, when we unweight the front wheel, we don't want to get height. We just want the wheel to get light. So your front wheel just needs to get off the ground ever so slightly. When we start out, we're going to start out slower and build up towards that higher speed. So in the beginning, you're going to use a much bigger movement. You're going to get nice and strong through the feet. You're going to load about half a wheel length before the lip, and it's going to be a nice, strong, big movement. Load, explode, and get that wheel up. There's a couple of important things to consider. The timing of the unweight becomes really important on a drop itself. If we unweight too far away from the lip, this could cause our front wheel to dip into the hole. So if we unweight too far, we load, explode the front wheel up, but if we don't have enough speed, the front wheel may dip into this hole over here, and then your back wheel is just going to roll over the lip, and that's going to cause you to get bucked. We also need to be aware of the bike running away from us. If the bike gets too far ahead of us as we unweight, our arms lengthen and the bike can pull us. And this pulling motion could also throw our weight forwards. Remember, when we do start dropping, we don't want to pull up on the bars and we don't want to pull up with our feet. This will just unbalance you and it will throw your weight forwards, or it will pick up your back wheel and allow you to get bucked more easily. We also need to consider what to do once the bike actually leaves the lip. So as soon as the bike takes off and as soon as your back wheel has cleared the lip, something we need to be aware of is the bike falling away from the body. If you allow the bike to fall away from your body, you may land awkwardly and too straight and too tall in your position. So to manage our bikes in the air, as soon as the back wheel has cleared the lip, we need to lower our body into the bike a little bit so that we can create extension in our arms. And as we get closer to the landing, we're going to extend our arms forward and our legs down to meet the landing. Once we've landed, we're going to absorb the impact. Cool guys, so before we start hitting those big drops to transition, it's quite important just to practice on small drops where we can land to flat. This allows us to dial in the movements of taking the bike off of the lip. So keeping all these steps in mind, practice your drops on a drop to flat enough before you progress to those drops to transition. Start slowly, but make sure that when you start slowly, you're producing enough movement and enough power in your movement to keep that front wheel up long enough for the back wheel to clear, and then build up your speed. And as you build up your speed, you'll find that this movement of load explode becomes a lot softer and a lot smaller. Essentially, the faster you go, the less you do. Once you have it dialed in on the small drop, go ahead and go a little bit bigger, but not too much bigger. Once the drop gets a bit bigger, it's really important to make sure that you stay in touch with your bike. Here the bike can easily fall quicker away from the body, and you also stay in the air for longer, so your bike has more time to drop away from you. So stay lower in your position when you go bigger, and as soon as you get off that lip, try and lower your body into the bike so that you can place those wheels on the ground when they need to touch down. Once you've got enough practice on the drop to flat, it's time to move to a drop to transition. At the drop to transition, nothing changes. The only difference is that you do have more air time and your landing is quite a lot lower than the edge of the lip, and you need to meet the angle of the landing with the angle of the bike.
When we get to drops that now have a transition landing, where the landing is at an angle and where it's also now further away from you, we really have to visualize matching the angle of the landing with our bikes. So we're going to come in on the drop, we're going to load our bikes with the right timing, we're going to get the front wheel up, wait for the back wheel to clear, and then we're going to think of extending our arms down and forward to meet our landing. Your hips will shift slightly behind the saddle as you extend your arms down and forward, and then the closer you get to your landing, you want to then start thinking of coming into the landing by extending your legs down too. Vision is one of the most important things in mountain biking, and I personally believe that vision and fear are directly linked to each other. So when we're fearful, we tend to fixate our vision on things, and we also tend to look down a lot more. So when it comes to drop-offs, this is our approach with vision. As we get onto the drop, we quickly scan the lip with our eyes, and then the closer we get to the edge of the drop, we then shift our vision forward to the landing. So we need to make sure that we keep our chin and our eyes up and look for the landing. If we drop our chin and we look down, our front wheel might go down, and this could cause us to get bucked. Nice!
Yeah, boy!
So I promised I would share how I overcome my fears of riding bigger drops. And for me, it's a complete mental game. Even though I've hit this big drop here a few times before, I still get super nervous and I don't always have the guts to do it. So I do two things to overcome my fears. I check in with myself and how I'm feeling on the day. I ask myself, am I feeling this drop today? You just have days on the bike where you're feeling it, and then you have days where you're just not. If I am feeling it, the second thing I do is visualize. I walk up to the drop with my bike and visualize the landing. I do not focus on the height of the drop, but rather my landing. I then go back and also do a few run-ups with the same visualization. I then go back to the start, close my eyes, take a few deep breaths, and I visualize myself doing the drop. I see myself conquering it. And then when I put my foot down on that pedal, I fully commit, give it my everything, and trust the process. I feel it's important to share that I didn't get to this point overnight. It took me a good few years and lots of practice on smaller drops, dialing in good form and technique, and slowly progressing to bigger drops. I encourage you to give this method a try and to let me know if it worked for you. I'd also love to hear how you overcome the mental game of fear. Drop them down in the comments below.
And that's a wrap for this video, guys.
Remember to start with small drops, focus on control, good form and technique, and focus on being smooth, not fast.
If you like our content, hit that subscribe button, click that bell notification, and give us a thumbs up. We'd really like to see you next time. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
We'll see you on the next video. Drop it like it's hot.